Hello all, this is the Casual Noob Gamer back at you with another video. Oh yeah. So been a while, and that's all I'm gonna say about that. If they're still up, the other videos on my channel around this time, you may have an idea of why I haven't been. Yeah. So let's talk about Zelda and the Zelda basically the series of games for Zelda. So I was thinking about this because I started jumping back into Skyward Sword, which, if you saw my video on me taking about 8 years to beat Breath of the Wild, well, Skyward Sword is a much longer journey. I still have not beaten that. Um, and I very much enjoyed my time with Breath of the Wild. I thought it was a great game when I first started it 8 years ago. Every time I booted it up and played it for a little bit, I was wanting to play more. For some reason, my stupid brain doesn't want me to enjoy myself, or some I can't figure it out. Yeah, so that's a whole psychological video down the line. Yeah. So basically, I enjoyed Breath of the Wild. I enjoyed it for what it is. I started playing Skyward Sword, and like you have a sailcloth in there, which is kind of like the glider. It is actually the inspiration for the glider. If you watched interviews and stuff like that with the developers of the games, um, a lot of this stuff like the stamina gauge, stuff like that, is a kind of a thing that made its way into Breath of the Wild. So, Skyward Sword has very good ideas. The only okay, so before Skyward Sword, people would have said that the worst 3D Zelda game was Majora's Mask, and that was for most likely the time mechanic, the fact that you had to beat the game in a certain time. Otherwise, the game, yeah, it would end, and you would lose. So you couldn't just like la di da di da all around. You had to, play the game and beat it. So I feel that that was, I mean, at least for me, that's one of the reasons that I've been like, hey, I don't even want to boot up Majora's, but kind of like I kind of started playing Ocarina again on the N64 app, and man, I mean, I'm sure, yeah, it's probably nostalgia too, but the game is great. Yeah, yeah, it's a little rough around the edges to modern day standards, but yeah, it's still good. Like the once you get into the boss battles and the dungeons, that is, see, that's where a lot of older Zelda fans kind of felt that the dungeons and the boss battles, that was like the puzzles, all that stuff, that was what made Zelda so. When Breath of the Wild came out, you know, a lot of traditional 3D Zelda fans bought Breath of the Wild because it's the new Zelda game, and they played it. And when I talked to a lot of old school Zelda fans, they didn't like. Well, not a lot. I mean, I only talked to like one or two that I met online, that I was able to kind of like, what, not sit down, but like in other words, to sit down with them to talk, and they did not like Breath of the Wild. And mind you, like I said, it's a good game. It's got good ideas. I like a lot of it, but they just did not like it, and I was surprised to hear, because at the time that I heard this was back in like, I'd say 2018, and back then, it was Breath of the Wild was like, every time you talk to anyone online, it was like, oh, Breath of the Wild is like the best thing ever. It's like the best game ever. It deserved all the praise. So to hear from like old school Zelda fans, and they just like were not not with this. So when it translates over to Tears of the Kingdom, a lot of the people who bought Breath of the Wild and then did not like it, they're not going to buy Tears of the Kingdom because Tears of the Kingdom was, touted as the sequel to Breath of the Wild. That's how it was first introduced. The sequel to Breath of the Wild is now in development. So if it's the sequel, then you would think you would have to have prior knowledge to Breath of the Wild. And a lot of the 3D Zelda fans that played Breath of the Wild that did not like it, did they not like it, but they finished it? Or did they not like it and they're like, I'm not playing this stupid game? And they put it down and never finished it. So if you never finished it, why would you buy and play the sequel to that game and be lost when you're playing it, even though they very much tried to fix a lot of the issues that the traditional 3D Zelda people had with Breath of the Wild. So then you take your people who liked Breath of the Wild and made it more towards the traditional, which maybe there were people who just didn't like regular Zelda, or maybe you just have new people who now got introduced in Breath of the Wild. So that's why the sales, I feel, were lower, and they're also going to be lower too because, like I said, it is touted as a sequel. Although, to be honest, I mean, I played a little bit of Tears of the Kingdom. I feel you kind of could get away with just starting there. I mean, yeah, you're not going to know a lot of what happened in the... I mean, I didn't play all the way through Tears of the Kingdom yet. That's for the next 8 years. That's my funny joke. But I imagine you could kind of just get away without it because, also Metroid Prime 4 is going to be out very soon as of the recording of this video. In a couple of days, less than a week. And Metroid Prime 4, I mean, Nintendo has said straight out that Metroid Prime 1 to 3 was kind of a story arc, and 4 is like the beginning of something new. So whatever happened in 1 to 3, like, you technically, maybe that's why they haven't put out 2 and 3, like, you don't need to play those to play 4. And maybe that's a big ask to ask people, as you go down the line of numbered sequels that kind of go one into the other, you're going to get less and less people who, continue on and then don't want to start up. So starting fresh and new is like the way to go. But my point is this: Skyward Sword on the Wii sold, if you believe what Google has said that I researched yesterday when I was thinking about this, it sold 3.67 million copies on the Wii. It sold 4 million copies on the Switch version. So, people are like, oh, Switch Effect, because, Switch Effect is, when you put a port of a game on the Switch, it sells more than the original because people on the Switch maybe are more inclined to play games. They were looking for more. Maybe it's just a bigger install base, although the Wii had about 100 million. So, and I think around when Skyward Sword came out, was it 2021? I think it was 2021. When it came out in 2021, I believe the Switch had 100 million around there. So, and then, like I said, it sold about the same. So the people who are clamoring that they wanted a 3D Zelda, although Nintendo gave them one of the worst 3D Zeldas in Skyward Sword, but maybe Nintendo was just like, okay, because they got Wind Waker and Twilight Princess in HD on the Wii U. Now they got Skyward Sword in HD on the Switch. So there's a rumor right now that Nintendo is going to remake Ocarina of Time, like a true, like full-blown remake, that Nintendo is heading up for this. And they're going to remake all the 3D Zeldas in basically like 4K 60 kind of like goodness, and just like redo them all, and that's going to be like the plan through the Switch 2 era, while they're working on the next Zelda game, because they want a good amount of time for it. So they're going to use those to kind of stave it off until that happens. So I mean, if that's the plan, I mean that's cool, because I mean honestly, like a good Ocarina of Time remake, like okay, so here's the thing. When I was playing Skyward Sword recently, when I just booted it up again, I think it was like yesterday. Um, the game plays, basically to sum it up, like ass. The controls are not, well. The controls are just not fun because the way the controls are with that game. You have a sailcloth, which does not let you glide anywhere. It just lets you take, hopefully, no fall damage. Although you gotta like deploy it like at a certain height. It's yeah. It doesn't. I usually take fall damage anyway. I don't know how to even get the cloth thing out. It's a pain in the butt. But basically, Skyward Sword does not play good. Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, those play better. Could they play even better? Of course they could. So my point is this: if they can make an ocarina, which also, even, you know what, I gotta say, that plays better than Skyward Sword. Well, that's because the motion controls. But the 3D Zeldas didn't play horrible, but the combat is much more refined in a Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom kind of thing. So, that being said, if you had better combat like Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom in a 3D traditional Zelda game like an Ocarina of Time with upgraded graphics from the N64, that would be a remake worth, sending a message home to. So that I could definitely get behind. So if Nintendo did something kind of like that, that is definitely, I like that. Do I want a new 3D Zelda game? I mean, listen, I still personally haven't played Tears of the Kingdom. I know there are people who have, but we just recently got, I mean, not even a week or two ago, or maybe 4 weeks ago, we got Age of Imprisonment from Hyrule Warriors, which is technically part of all that, although I know it's a Muso game, so yeah, that's different, but there's something more there. We got a lot of Zelda this year. We got Wind Waker, we got Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, Switch 2 edition. We got Hyrule Warriors, Age of Imprisonment. To be honest, if we just get Ocarina next year, I think that is well enough to celebrate the Zelda 40th anniversary. But we will see. We will see what they do. And so my thoughts, I mean, I know I said I always get away from my topic. I know, I'm sorry. My thoughts are, I'm just going over what I think is that, Nintendo, I feel, kind of split the base of their Zelda fans. Because you got the traditional fans, which I feel some of them have embraced Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom kind of style open worldness, and a lot of them just rejected it. So you kind of had that split. And those traditional fans, I mean, they're doing the same numbers that they were doing before, because Skyward Sword on Wii sold 3.67 million. Skyward Sword on Switch sold 4 million. So, are we really getting a big increase? Like people coming over trying these? I don't think we are. I mean, yeah, it's bad to use Skyward Sword, one of the worst Zelda games, in speak online, in chat forums. When you ask people, they always said Skyward Sword is the worst. I mean, that fixing of the controls makes it a lot better. And don't get me wrong, I like the game, but I will say, as to talk about Skyward Sword for a second, I am, spoiler alert, I'm in Elden Volcano, or I was. And I had to get the 5 pieces of the key to open the door in the volcano. And you could use basically the dowsing ability to find the pieces of the key. This last piece, it kept saying it was like in this mountain, and I didn't realize it was the mountain that I had come out of to get down to the place. But basically, as you're sliding down the sand holds in this mountain, you had to get on top of a flat surface and basically slide onto there, and then from there then use 2 air current geysers to get over to another one. But who would have thought to have done that? Because you figure you're just sliding down this mountain thing and that's it. But as you're sliding down, so the last piece of the key that I was looking for, at least because I searched that whole volcano area, was in there. And I would never have thought to look for that if I hadn't watched a video where someone showed all the locations of these keys. Now, mind you, I will say pretty much every Zelda game I've played, 3D Zelda, I've had to use some sort of guide for something. So it's not uncommon. But this here, the way that this was set up, I mean, I was literally scratching my head trying to figure this out. And it's just like, I mean, I want to say it's like bad game development, but I feel that that gets used a little too, loosely nowadays. Because I remember when famously David Jaffe couldn't figure out how to destroy a destructible wall. But, you don't know it's a destructible wall in Metroid Dread. And he was like, oh, this is bad game development, what they did here. And it's kind of like, well, if you've played older Metroid games, you know that walls are destructible. But that part even, confused me a little bit. Because, they did put an enemy there. So if you were shooting at the enemy, you would hopefully, miss in your shot and the wall would break. And then you would be like, oh, that's what I have to do. And then you would figure it out. But if you were just searching and leaving enemies alone, because you could just leave that enemy that was crawling on the ceiling alone, you could miss it. So I get it. I get where people say it's bad game design. And it kind of is, but it kind of goes to what I would say is the tradition of these games and what they do. These games have a history, and when you have a long history of these things, this is why these games are not as friendly to newcomers, because if you don't have the history of these games to know that something like that could be done, then you're not going to look for that. And that might be why, I know there's been a big controversy, but I kind of missed it because I was kind of a little preoccupied with stuff medically in life for about a month, so I didn't really follow too much of the discourse. But there's apparently some character in Metroid Prime 4 called Mackenzie that talks a little too much, which kind of, this relates to Zelda, because that's like Fi from Skyward Sword and Navi, which I don't find annoying. I mean, they beep and they bother you, but I mean, whatever. But that might be a way that Nintendo wants to just make these games more accessible to more people, so people don't get stuck with things and get frustrated and then don't continue and play them. Because Nintendo may have those initial sales, like Breath of the Wild sold 30 million, but how many of those 30 million are going to go and buy the sequel because they really like the game? That's why Nintendo has totals, and they can see who has the hours that you would put in to complete a game. Some people may have the hours, but they got frustrated and got stuck. And they have the hours, but they don't have that end conclusion to the game. Which is why I think that trophies are not only good for us, but for the publishers and developers, like Nintendo. Because if you have a trophy that says, I beat the game, then you know you met the criteria for that game to beat it. Instead of just having the hours and Nintendo going, look, he's got 40 hours in Breath of the Wild. He must have beat it. Which I had about 40 hours, but I didn't beat it at that point. It wasn't until I had 40 hours on one Switch, and then I didn't transfer over my play data, and then I had another 20 hours on another Switch, so I had 60 total about before I really beat the game. So yeah, this is just my thoughts. I hope that Nintendo hasn't split the fan base. I'm sure they did a little bit. But, listen, they'll be fine in whatever they do. I know I will continue playing the games and buying the games because I like the series. And I have to say that I do notice that one thing I do like is that for almost every Zelda, Nintendo tries a new kind of control scheme kind of layout with everything. It's usually fresh and new. It's not just like a new coat of paint and it's the same tired formula. So, you'll get a Skyward Sword or a Majora's Mask where, like, you're doing a time mechanic or you're having an open world. But Nintendo tries something new. Even with the open world in Tears of the Kingdom, they tried the build mechanic with that kind of one. So there's always something new that Nintendo is trying and trying to see what the fans like. And do they just take the same thing and do it over again? Not exactly. But that's what the great thing I feel about the series is. So I can't wait for the next one. And this is the Casual Noob Gamer saying like, subscribe, comment, hit the bell notification to know when I put up videos because it is infrequently. And if you want a surprise notification on your device app, wherever it comes to, and you're like, hey, my favorite YouTube content creator, the Casual Noob Gamer, just put out a video. Let me go check it out. Anyway, you have a great rest of your day. Later.